This is an epilepsy warning for those who have that. Sonic Advance sometimes has flickering graphics, and it's kind of hard to change each one. So sometimes there may be some flickering. So if you have problems like that, I don't recommend watching this video. But hey, do it at your own risk. Also apologize for the previous Sonic video I did not having the best mic quality. I was just trying to figure out this thing, and I thought I had it in the right settings, but I didn't, like an idiot. And I recorded like 50 minutes of audio. I was like, screw it, it's just a filler video anyway. Probably shouldn't have done a video like that, but it doesn't really matter. So yeah, my mic's better now. Thank you very much. Our last handheld game was Sonic Pocket Adventure, and for some reason that video got a lot of views. A lot of people apparently just had very odd opinions and trying to gaslight me into thinking that the Neo Geo Pocket was this great console. I mean, I'm not sure. Not sure it is, but I've never seen one ever out in the wild, and I go game hunting and thrifting all the time. And I've seen things like the 3DO and Jaguar, and I have not yet to see any Neo Geo products. Neo Geo is kind of niche, it has a big cult fan base. I know that, and it was a lot more popular in Japan. But here in America, they're rare and expensive, so it's not a common thing everyone has. So I was like, "Well, you didn't play this?" Yeah, I told you in the last video. I played the SNK collection on Wii. It only had one volume though. It was Volume 1. Never made a Volume 2. If it's that popular, why didn't make Volume 2? That's all I can say. Not that it really matters, because Pocket Adventure I thought was just pretty okay and mediocre at best, to be honest. It didn't have that much going for it, at least in my opinion. It was just mostly taking assets from the Genesis games, which I guess is impressive, but honestly, it didn't seem that more impressive than any other console of a handheld at the time. So, like, compared to the Game Gear games, it wasn't really that much of a step up. But it was important for this video. The reason I'm mentioning this is because I made a mistake in that video. Because it turns out that, yes, the people who did make this game were also involved with making the game we're going to talk about today, being DIMS. You see, even though it was made by SNK, a lot of those people who worked in that division would actually form, I guess they liked working on Sonic, so they eventually would form DIMS, a subsidiary, I'm pretty sure, of Sega in the year 2000. And of course, their first game would be. And that game is Sonic Advance. Well, kind of. Their actual first game came out, well, same year Sonic Advance, being Digimon Battle Spirit, well, on the Wonder Swan. And yeah, the Wonder Swan's basically a console that only came out in Japan, so we don't really know anything about it. In fact, the footage here is from the GBA version, because I can't find the Wonder Swan version, because basically, who the hell had a Wonder Swan? Now the people in comments are like, "Oh, I had a Wonder Swan. It's an amazing console." So yeah, stop lying, people. Seriously, stop lying. Other than the Sonic games, they're most known for making Dragon Ball games, which they are still doing to this day. They are supported by different companies, most notably Bandai Namco, who's biggest supporter of them since they seem to be making most games for them. And they haven't made a Sonic game or Sega since 2013. They also have part ownership by Sony, but they also haven't done anything with Sony since like 2016. So they're basically just, they're not officially owned by it, but they're partly owned by Bandai Namco, and that's what they're doing. I don't know how great these games are. I never played them. You let me know in the comment section. For the time being, we are going to be seeing a lot of DIMPs because they made a ton of handheld Sonic games from 2001 into 2013. And there's quite a lot. In fact, a lot of them have nice fan bases. Basically, Sonic Advance was a, hey, let's redo Pocket Adventure, but, make it an actual full-on game rather than just copying and pasting elements from the Genesis games, but not that well done, in my honest opinion. Things about Sonic Advance you can notice from the box art. It's fine box art, but in the right corner, THQ. What do you mean THQ? Well, yeah, apparently for some reason Sega had THQ publish the games in North America, while Infogrames published them in Europe and Australia. This, of course, caused problems because now they own the distribution rights to Sonic Advance. They need Sega approval to do it, so they can't really do it. THQ went bankrupt, but they were bought out by Nordic companies, so THQ Nordic. You already know all that if you know anything about games. So essentially, Sonic Advance basically cannot be released unless they do a THQ thing because Sega decided not to publish them itself. Maybe it's because the first time they're doing a Sonic game on a Nintendo console. I have no idea why. But Sonic Advance and its sequels have been re-released in Japan on mobile and the Wii U, but but not in North America or anywhere else. And that kind of sucks because I don't understand why they do this. I can't really find a reason why they did it. If anyone has an idea, let me know, because it doesn't make any sense to me why they made other publishers do it, since, they're big enough by themselves. Why would they need THQ? Here's a fun fact for you. Jakks Pacific, who's the current toy master of the Sonic franchise, who make all the figures and plushes currently, the company was founded by the same guy who found THQ. So isn't that neat? It's all in the circles, like poetry, they rhyme. The most notable things about Sonic Advance is it is the first Sonic game that we really got on the Nintendo console, especially exclusive. We had Sonic Adventure 2, but that was already on Dreamcast. This one, full on, went on Nintendo, which is crazy. Nintendo and Sega were rivals, but now they're not. As a matter of fact, Sonic would find a nice home at Nintendo. Despite going multi-platform, he really wouldn't do that until 2004. And even then, he still has more exclusive games on Nintendo consoles than any other console brand when it comes to PC, Xbox, or PlayStation. So overall, Sonic somehow found a great place at his rival's own game console. And yeah, he really works on Nintendo consoles. In fact, I know some people who think that Sonic's a Nintendo character who don't, because they don't know a lot. It also doesn't help that Sega just pretty much ditched all their old properties until I guess recently. I mean, they've had other game companies work for them that doesn't have the Sega logo on them. A lot of franchises people don't know are actually owned by Sega. But other than that, their classic franchises they basically kind of ditched and threw in a hole for some reason. I don't know why they did that. This was also the time that the Sega released were Monkey Ball on Nintendo GameCube, real cementing that Sega was going to be on Nintendo products. And Monkey Ball is awesome. That's why I'm mentioning it here. It was a launch title for the GameCube. Maybe not a launch title, but it came out the same year, so I kind of count that as a launch title. So now that we know that Sonic and Mario are now allies and Sega's working with Nintendo now, let's see what they gave us with Sonic Advance. Sonic Advance, in my opinion, feels like the truest form of Sonic the Hedgehog 4. Ironically, the same company would make a game called Sonic 4, but we'll get to that. It's not really an actual sequel. But yeah, Sonic Advance, I can't even speak, is one of the most basic Sonic plots. Eggman's concocted an evil scheme, basically making animals into robots. He's got all the 7 Chaos Emeralds, and Sonic and his friends, being Tails, Knuckles, and Amy, are setting off to stop him. There's not a whole lot other than what's in the game itself. There's some interesting, nice little storytelling in the game itself, not really giant ones like Sonic 3, but it is nice, simple, and sweet. So let's get into it. You're given the option of playing as all 4 characters, and actually, if you want to complete the game entirely, you have to play the game as all the characters. There is different gameplay styles, but no difference in level design, in case you're wondering. First, there is Sonic. Sonic controls as he did in the classic Sonic games. It feels pretty close to what it was, if not almost identical. Sonic can spin dash, he has momentum-based physics, he even has the Insta-Shield, which is awesome. The only difference now is that Sonic looks like he did in Sonic Adventure, of a new sprites that we'll see a lot of, and these sprites, known as the advanced sprites, I love them. They were used a lot back in the day on old internet, but they look really cool. It's like, hey, look at this. Sonic looks really awesome in a 32-bit setting. Is GBA 32-bit? I don't really know. Also, the soundtrack is very GBA, but you already know what the GBA soundtrack sounds like. But let's go over some unique characteristics. Sonic is the only character you can grind rails. There's barely any rails in the game. Yeah, this is the first time he's grinding rails with his regular shoes rather than the soap shoes, which were what they were designed for. Isn't it funny? A mechanic of Sonic was created because of an advertisement of a brand that doesn't exist anymore. Kind of crazy. So there's barely any rails in the game, so it's not really a big deal. But yeah, that's one of the mechanics he can have. He also has a somersault ability if you press the B button twice, like Sonic Adventure 2, but you're barely going to use it, or 3 times for a slide. I actually forgot he had that because it's basically entirely pointless, so once you want to do it, go right ahead. He also has the ability to jump dash, which is kind of like a little dash in the air. That's only if you tap the directional button after doing another jump. It's okay, it doesn't add that much to the game, but it is pretty neat. Alright, here's Tails. Tails has most of his same mechanics he had in Sonic 3, that you can fly, and he does all the stuff that Sonic can do. He also can swim, and that's pretty much it. He doesn't have really anything else. I guess he has an up attack if you want to press the B button twice, and punch it. No, he doesn't do that. Sorry, I looked at Knuckles' thing over here. He can fly, and he can swim, which is very useful during the, there's a 1 water level in the game, and it's kind of annoying, a lot of water, so that is useful. And he does a tail attack by a regular press of the B button if you're at a standstill, I guess. Yeah, right. It's not bad. It's not useful, like I said. In the attack, you basically are going to be using your ball jump attacks anyway. So they're neat. They're a little trade-overs from the adventure games. Like, look, they have the same abilities, but they're not as useful in the certain areas because the jumping is so much more useful here. Also, one of the note things, even though they have the adventure-style gameplay little elements for pressing certain things, Sonic doesn't have his homing attack. Layer 2D games would add this back, but here in the Advanced series, he doesn't have it at all, which is pretty interesting. Knuckles also has most of the same moveset from Sonic 3, except his jump doesn't. I'm not sure if it is, but it's not lowered like it was in Sonic 3, or at least if it is, it's very minimal. His glides also has more momentum than it did in those games, so he's pretty good. He has a couple unique move sets, like if you can do the glide underwater, and that will make it a long distance swim, so it kind of works like it regular does. So hey, underwater Knuckles can do a nice swim. Can't swim like he does in Sonic Adventure 2, but he can. And pressing the B button, you can do a punch attack, and B 3 times does an uppercut. Like I said, a lot of those attacks aren't that useful, but they are there. The next character is actually a new character for Sonic in 2D. It's Amy. We play as Amy in Sonic Adventure. How do they translate that into 2D? Well, they decided to do something pretty interesting. So, like I said, these are all kind of based off their adventure movesets with the classic games in mind. What Amy does is that she cannot go into ball mode unlike the other characters. This actually means that you got to use your hammer attacks in order to do damage. It's actually pretty simple once you get used to it. She also seems to have better like acceleration compared to other characters because she does not have a spinning dash. She'll just do a little jump if you try to doing that. But yeah, essentially Amy will just jump in the air without any ball form, and you got to use your hammer. But the hammer adds like a lot of range, sort of like the insta shield that Sonic has, but all the time. And you can use the hammer to hit springs easier because some of the springs have weird mechanics. They can't hit them all the time easily. And also she has a dive bomb with her hammer, which is pretty interesting. So yeah. Also, if you hold down and your hammer button, she will launch herself in the air, so she jump up pretty high and take some unique shortcuts. It may seem a little harder, but it is actually a unique playstyle, and some people will actually prefer playing as Amy. Some people don't like it, some people prefer it. I'm in the middle. I like this playstyle a lot, and wish they brought it back in Superstars, or was it Origins had this playstyle. I think it's pretty unique. They kind of had similar versions, but they basically just keep it like the same as the other characters. I like the unique version of Amy, alright? And of course, with AB, she has a jump attack. If you hold down A and B, it's a heart sliding attack. Down in A for down and B is a whirling attack, I guess. Those are what they're called. While exploring stages, you'll find Big Spring. This is the way to get to the special stage. The special stage kind of sucks. So I guess, hey, we're skydiving on a snowboard. Fortunately, because of the way the graphics look in the depth perception, it's just awful. Sometimes you feel like you're right on top of the rings, but you're not because it's so hard to tell because you're playing on a console that can't really do 3D that well. So you're basically trying to figure out, like, am I touching it? I don't really feel like I am. Plus, the ring barriers are incredibly high. I mean, you pretty much have to collect every single ring. When it's really hard to collect them, it's basically shit. This special stage sucks. It's probably one of the worst special stages there is, to be honest. To make matters even worse, you don't even get to play Supersonic in regular gameplay, even if you get all 7 Chaos Emeralds, or Super Knuckles, Super Tail, or Super Amy, so lame. Lame! Not that they're necessary, because it only unlocks one little level at the very end of the game that you have, in order to get to, you have to beat the game multiple times with all the characters. And like I said, the levels are exactly the same, no matter what character you choose. But let's get into those levels. First level is Neo Green Hill Zone. Neo meaning new, I guess, or a reference to the Neo Geo Pocket, or Neo Geo in general, which is what the other one was in the last game. A lot of these acts are very similar to the Pocket Adventure, but redone. So Neo Green Hill Zone looks more like Emerald Coast than anything Green Hill Zone related. There's some Green Hill elements. It's kind of a combination of the both worlds, because Sonic Advance is a combination of the classic style gameplay with adventure style modern artwork. We also got enemies, and most of these enemies have appeared in previous games, like from Adventures series as well as the classic games. Like we have a Buzzer. We already talked about the Buzzer multiple times in this channel. It's a basic Buzz Bomber type B thing we've seen a long time. As well as Kiki, who this game franchise seems to love a lot, the little monkey guy from Sonic Adventure, who's based off the monkey guy from Sonic 2. And Rhino Tank, which is also from Sonic Adventure. You just saw hit me. Basically, these enemies work exactly the same as they did in previous installments, so I don't really need to say anything about that. There is 2 new enemies. This is Gammy Gammy, and based off the artwork, you can tell what this is. This is a crab meat, and for some reason, they just didn't call it crab meat. We got Kiro, the last badnik here. It's a little frog, and then just hops towards you. And that's it. They suck. And everything else, the level is pretty much the same. We have rings, the same item boxes we've had in previous games, nothing new there. When we run past the flag post, we get a nice running animation of their characters doing a pose as they run, which I always like. I like when the characters are running to the next stage rather than just staying motionless, sometimes just waiting. One cool thing about this game you'll see as you go to later levels is that despite there not being much of a story, there's really cool level progression. Where as you go through each of the stage, you'll notice that in the background we're getting higher and higher and higher. So our characters basically are traveling upwards through the sky and all the way into space. And I always thought that's pretty cool. Basically, Neo Green Hill Zone is a pretty fun and fair stage. Nothing too exciting, but it has the aesthetic charm of new and old, and it's a perfect balance between those new players and old players. For the most part, there really isn't nothing new, but you will notice a lot of springs. This game loves the springs. For some reason, they love the springs. And the weird thing about certain springs at an angle is that you can get stuck on top of them. You have to hit them a certain right way to get bounced back, and that just kind of jarring. There are speed boosters, but there's not a whole lot. There will be a lot later on. For the most part, in Sonic Advance 1, it feels mostly like a classic Sonic game. Sometimes it feels a little off. There's some level design elements that don't feel like they would be in one of the Genesis titles. Like, okay, that's a little annoying. But other than that, it's perfectly fine. Neo Green Hill Zone is a really fun stage. It's the best well-designed stage. It's sort of like Green Hill Zone in Sonic 1, where it feels like they put the most amount of designs into here. It doesn't have certain elements that the game and other future advanced games would be notorious for, being a lot of bottomless pits. There's like none here. But yeah, eventually you'll run on this nice bridge and you'll see Dr. Eggman. And what's he got for us? Why, he's got the deadly, the dangerous Egg Hammer Tank. This is a pretty interesting boss, kind of like a flip version of the first egg ball and chain boss, which I completely forgot the name of that. Did that have a name? Egg spinner, whatever, doesn't really matter. Anyway, essentially you gotta avoid it, and after a couple hits, he'll do a freak out move, but he's pretty easy. It's pretty easy to collect your rings, and yeah, that's the end of that. And you'll get dropped a capsule, which will free all your little animal buddies. And all the animals are based off of how they look in Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, which is pretty neat. Our next stage is Secret Base Zone, where basically we're coming from the city with all the spotlights and ziplining into Eggman's secret base. Yeah, this little city and ziplining part is basically all you see is that. The rest of this is in kind of an industrial factory, which is a very interesting theming for our second level of a game, but hey, I guess Chemical Plant is also that. This is like I said, in the Neo Geo Pocket game, there was Chemical Plant with the second level, and this doesn't really look anything like it because they decided like let's make a unique factory style level, and it's fun. Anyway, we got 3 enemies here, and they're all 3 new unique enemies. Let's go over them. We got Mogu, whatever. It's a little mole guy, and these guys will just pop up randomly, and that's about it. They aren't very useful, good at what their job is, which is to block Sonic, because a lot of times we'll go towards them, they'll hide, so yeah, they don't have any items to throw at you, so they're basically enemies you've seen before, but terrible. Eggman, what were you thinking? When I say terrible sometimes, I mean this bad level design, I mean it's bad Eggman design. I'm calling you out, Eggman. This is a bad Nick. You should be ashamed of yourself. Senbon is the next enemy. It's a little pufferfish guy that floats in the air. It's very similar to the Bubbles enemy from Sonic 3, where it will have its spikes not out sometimes, sometimes it will, and that's all it does. 10-2 is a ladybug badnik, not to be confused with our lovely Motobug. These guys will hop up and down from ceiling to the floor and shoot projectiles out 2 sides. They can be kind of annoying, but there's not a whole lot of them, but sometimes there are. This zone is mostly known for having a lot more tight spaces and a lot more platforming. Well, the first stage is mostly about getting running around and going to higher platforms, lower platforms, depending what you will. This one's more about using some of the mechanics as well as bouncy stuff, bouncing around, running on oil slicks, as well as getting running on conveyor belts. When I mean conveyor belts, I actually mean these like little claw grabber things that appear in the level. There's this one section to deal with these really odd hooks that are just dangling back and forth. They kind of suck. There's not much left to say about this industrial zone, so let's see what Eggman has in store for us at the end of Act 2. This is the Egg Press, and the Egg Press will press Sonic down, I guess. It's just him bouncing around, and yeah, that's about it. Nothing too exciting here. Next up is Casino Paradise Zone. This is our basic casino level. This one has a hint of was it Circus Park? I have a brain fart. Carnival Night Zone for Sonic 3. The big difference is that it's in the forest, as well as there's a castle in the background. This is a fun stage. Definitely takes the casino, one of the best casino levels, in my opinion, that we've seen so far. It has fluent motion. You got these fun flags that launch Sonic in the air. There's not a whole lot of things, not many obstacles, and not really any bottomless pits compared to some of the later levels that we're going to get to. One of the weird things about this game is that they love bottomless pits, but there's not any really crushing in the game. I've seen like 2 things that could crush me, but I never did get crushed by anything, so that's fun and all. Anyway, let's go over the 3 new enemies in this stage. Our first enemy is Hanabii, Hanabii. I don't know how to pronounce it. The little chameleon guy rolls back and forth and will shoot one little lobbed projectile at you. They're not very scary. Next is Periot, I think. Periot. Whatever, it's a little clown guy type of ball. This guy basically got to hit it from the top because if you hit at the bottom, it'll get bounced back. Slot is a bat guy who drops coins on Sonic and friends and just basically avoid the coins and hit them. All these enemies are pretty easy to deal with. This level has unique things, but overall it's nothing too spectacular, stuff we haven't seen before. It's got a nice aesthetic, but you're not going to be screaming, oh yeah, this zone is great. I mean, I like it, but we haven't seen anything different from zones before previously that aren't like this. They are like this, is what I'm trying to say. But it's not a bad zone. The second act does have a little bit more pinball stuff compared to the first act, but Overall, there's not a whole lot, and it's not too difficult. I know some people aren't a big fan of the pinball elements. Sometimes I can get on my nerves. I'm looking at you, Sonic Spinball, but it's not too bad. One of the problems I do have with this game, though, is that these spikes always feel like they're way too high for Sonic to jump over, and there's a lot of them in certain areas that are really annoying. Like, I don't usually have that problem with certain Sonic games, but here I feel like the spikes, like, they're always there and they're always hard to jump over. Anyway, the boss fight is here. The boss fight is known as Egg Ball. Essentially, Eggman's in a ball. He's going to come out for different types of tubes, and one tube will actually feature a bad thing that will hurt you, a little spike bomb thing, and you got to avoid it. And you'll come out at different angles, and you got to duck under it in order to hit him. It's kind of tedious, and it could be a little hard for new players, but yeah, you have to, once in a while you'll figure it out. Our next zone is Ice Mountain Zone. As you can see in the background, we've been climbing up a little bit. We started on the ground level of the beach, we went inside a factory, we were looking at the top of a forest, now we're on top of an ice mountain. Ice Mountain seems like a typical ice level, but it's actually kind of a water level. Now, water isn't as bad in this game as it is in some of the previous Sonic games. It's not moving at fast like you are in Sonic 3 through it, but you're also not in slogging yourself down like you are in Sonic 1, for example. Overall, this stage is definitely when you're going to see people who are playing it fine before have trouble. Because this is when the game's like, alright, all the safety gloves are off. This game is hard now. Anyway, let's go for the new enemies before we talk about the level itself. First, we got Dirasame. If you can tell, this is one of those games where they didn't bother translating the enemy names, so they're hard to pronounce, and you're never really going to be able to say it out loud, since these guys only appear in this one game. Anyway, these are like drill sharks that will pop out of the wall. That's about it. Nothing too special here. Kara is a jellyfish that has electrical fields sometimes and will other times. You've seen this enemy type before. We've seen it in this game. Basically, has a force field that you can't attack it, and when it's down, you attack it. We then get Pen, which is a little penguin. These guys reappear in Sonic Advance 2. They're basically like the Penguinators, except they throw snowballs. Very scary. Yukomaru is a snowman that shoots snowballs out its head, and can be on walls and floors and ceilings. And yeah, that's all they do is shoot. They shoot one snowball at you. After playing in the mountains a little bit, you'll be underwater caves, and yeah, these sections could take a while. What happens here is that your speed is reduced, but your momentum and height is increased by a dramatic amount. This is also one of the first stages to, from my experience, have bottomless pits. There's actually a good amount of air bubbles, and they produce way more bubbles than they did in previous games, which makes it so that drowning isn't too much of a challenge here. So these sections, while they are more daunting and it is more challenging, it's still not bad. It's fine. I mean, it's not ideal Sonic water level because it's a little, just a little too much waiting on platforms and getting shot out at by random enemies. But other than that, it's not too bad. And like I said, the air bubbles are plentiful and they respawn very quickly, which is a nice feature. I don't know why they were so slow in the other games. Is Sega just likes to fuck with us? Anyway, this is the first game where the air bubbles feel like they're actually coming out at a nice, decent speed. This is the Egg Spider. Eggman's on top of the ceiling or underwater, and we gotta jump on icicles to hit him. Similar to the Hydro City boss fight, however, because of how annoying it is to get to the very top, there's not a lot of air up there. Even if we jump on the things at the right time, it's a little easier said than done. And you also gotta make sure you hit him, Eggman. With the bottom parts of the spikes, you can't hit. So it's a lot pretty tricky. Even if you get a nice jump on them, depending on where they spawn and stuff like that, and where you're a little slow jump going, it's kind of hard to get air bubbles. So I recommend just trying to be as patient as possible. Make sure you jump on the icicles and try to get air over hitting Eggman. But yeah, that's what I recommend for this. It is a very challenging boss fight, but once you get that done, it shouldn't be too hard. Also, you have when you're Sonic, you have your little Insta Shield, which also makes your attack range longer. Like I said, it's not as good as Sonic 3's, but it's still useful. This is definitely one of the levels that if you're playing as Tails or Knuckles, you have a great advantage over Sonic or Amy, who cannot swim. We know Sonic can't swim, but apparently Amy can't either. And Knuckles can swim in this game, but it's basically like a dive. Overall, it's not a bad stage, but it is a little daunting. However, it gets pretty hard when we get to the boss fight. The next zone is Angel Island Zone. Yeah, Angel Island Zone. It's actually on the Sky Sanctuary part of Angel Island, but yeah, we're back on Angel Island, and we're playing through. Story-wise, I don't know if there's a reason why we're here. I mean, Knuckles is involved, so maybe that's why Eggman just wants to be here, but other than that, there is really no reason why we're here. This level is kind of where it gets kind of annoying. The last stage could be a little annoying. This one is where, like, alright, everything's a bottomless pit. We are in the sky, so I guess that makes sense. And Sky Sanctuary, I think, did have bottomless pits, but I just never experienced it in the game. But here, there are some areas where you'll fall in bottomless pits, or you'll have to do certain areas over and over again at this point. Because you can go back, and we're not even realizing it. Like, oh wait, the level design can take me back here? I didn't know that. I guess getting this one little secret here took me back? That's not fair. Anyway, all the enemies here are pretty much the same we've seen. We have the Buzzer, which you've seen talked about before. Leon, which we've seen in previous Sonic games, obviously. He's very annoying here. He'll shoot his little tongue in the worst ways possible. The Rhino Tank, and one new enemy. This is Whammo. We've seen similar enemy types like this before. It's just a caterpillar guy that's floating in the sky. Not very exciting. Just keep in mind certain platforming sections that you got to be careful, because if you try to go ahead and you miss and place your jump, you'll die. This stage isn't bad, but some of the areas, unless you've played this before, keep in mind the Game Boy Advance screen is smaller than your typical TV screen, so it's kind of hard to see stuff like that, especially knowing where there actually is bombless pits. I know Sonic Generations has this thing where they actually tell you where bombless pits are in the game, which is nice, but we're not at Sonic Generations, are we? There's also little rolling ball puzzles, which are fine, though they can be a little tricky-dicky. Act 2 in particular I find quite annoying, where I've had areas where I keep going back and forth between areas that I have been to before. I'm not a Sonic Advance expert, I have played this game before, but this level, even if you played it before, can be a little annoying, unless you want to master Sonic Advance and know each the perfect layouts. The game tricks you and you have to backtrack, which isn't the most fun thing in the world. After all that, we meet Knuckles. Hey, what are you doing here? And why are you wearing yellow gloves? Maybe he has those power punching gloves from Sonic Adventure 1. He's pink and has yellow gloves. He's kind of a similar boss fight to Sonic 3 boss. But hey, let's beat up Knuckles. What? He's exploding. What? What is this? This is Mecha Knuckles. Mecha Knuckles is pretty interesting because they had a metal Knuckles. Remember in Sonic R, it was pretty cool, but they decided, no, we're going to do this version. This is a robot designed by Eggman, I guess, to get distracted by Angel Island things. I don't know what else lives in Angel Island in the Sonic universe. Probably nothing now. They're all dead. But yeah, this is just like a. I guess Eggman is like, hey, I'm going to Angel Island. I'm gonna put little Knuckles here just to fuck with everybody. Unfortunately, he's not that tough. He has made a reappearance in the comic series, which I guess is now tied into the game canon based off the wiki now. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but this guy, he's okay. Not the best design. Like I said, Metal Knuckles is better design, but it's pretty interesting. He mostly will just shoot a bunch of missiles at you, for the most part, from his mouth. I don't know where he keeps all them, but he's pretty easy. Other than the fact he shoots missiles out of his mouth and he's dead. I guess Eggman thought he would do a lot better. It looks like he exploded to death. That's probably why we never see him again. The next zone is the most unique zone in the game, Egg Rocket Zone. We're now on Angel Island anymore. Maybe we just jumped off into a nice little canyon background. Essentially, Eggman's built another launch base to launch a rocket, and here's the one here. Throughout the game, you'll see cutscenes where basically parts of it are getting launched. So we're getting more and more higher in the sky. Like I said, we're traveling higher and higher up and up. So yeah, does this level have any interesting enemies? Well, it does. We have Mirror, who's one of the most annoying enemies. He'll stay like a little, whatever, diamond shape. I had a brain fart there for a second, sorry. And then it will basically attack after that. And yeah, these can be really annoying, especially if they're placed in the more spots possible. So screw this little whatever hell it's supposed to be. There's also Oct. These guys will shoot projectiles down. They aren't terrible, but they're placed in annoying spots, much like the other enemies, so they're also incredibly annoying. And pretty much the only other badnik is the Mogu, who we've seen before. This level is pretty daunting. It has some cool aesthetics. Like I said, we're moving up for the sky, which is pretty cool. But it has some of the problems that the Angel Island Zone had, which is the fact that there's a lot of bottomless pits, and a lot of times you fall down, you might go back, like way back in a level, because some of the level design decisions aren't the greatest here. It seems like when they're trying to do some challenging ones, they kind of go overboard in certain areas, dimps, compared to the classic games, which had challenge, but they're more about platforming. Here, it's like try to figure out which pathway is right. You go here, well, I found a power up, but uh-oh, that's not exactly right. It's not terrible, but it is a little more annoying. Like I said, this game is still good, and this level is still fine. It's just that the challenge is mostly avoiding the bombless pits and trying to figure out which is the right pathway to go. Because I've had pathways that just give me a power up, and then I try to go back, and uh-oh, I'm now back way farther down a level, which is something you don't usually see in the other Sonic games, so it's kind of jarring. Also, this zone doesn't have any save points, so if you die from the many bombless pits, you'll have to go back to the very start of each act, which, if you couldn't guess, is not very fun. This zone feels like it has the Metropolis Zone feeling, but unlike Metropolis Zone, which I actually like, this zone is annoying because, like I said, there's no way to really save yourself. There's a bunch of rings and stuff like that, but like I said, that won't help you in a bottomless pit. So even though there's a lot of annoying things like Metropolis Zone, it makes this zone really annoying. I don't like backtracking in a Sonic game. It doesn't feel right to do that. I never had to do that before, And most of the time, it made no sense. Like, I got an invincibility power up that I can barely use because you have it all the way over here. And, oh, this pathway takes me all the way back down. And, oops, I fell down on the bottomless pits. And I gotta redo everything all over again. It's lovely. Anyway, after all that, part of it will finally go off again. And we will be reaching into the final frontier, which is space. Sonic is now in space. He's used to being in space by now, so it's not really that drastic of a change for him. During this, the gravity also changes a little bit in the level, which is, very Sonic 3, if you will. Sonic will go upside down based off, I guess, the ship's turning around. So now we're upside down, which is pretty interesting. Overall, it's pretty cool. Doesn't last very long, so it's not really difficult. But hey, it's pretty neat. Eventually, you'll make it to a spring area. We'll find that we're in the ending of the level, which was only Act 1. Lovely. But it kind of was Act 1, because Act 2 is called Cosmic Angel Zone, so completely different level. So instead of just spreading that level into different acts, they decided to make it one act. I do not know why they decided to do this, but oh well. Here's Cosmic Angel Zone. Cosmic Angel is basically similar to the Death Egg Zone from Sonic 3, except not really. Despite its different appearance, obviously, the enemies are basically the same. We've already experienced. We get more anti-gravity, and honestly, since there's less bottomless pits, this level is a lot easier than the previous one, even though it's supposed to be hard. Well, the question is, Sega, it's that it was not hard. In fact, while the previous zone act took me 20 minutes, this zone only took me 2 minutes to get to the boss here, which is the Eggman here. Basically, he's going to shoot bullets at you, but you want to make sure he bounces back so you can hit him. It's actually trickier said than done, but once you get into a nice rhythm, you can get him. So once again, we defeat Eggman and his Egg Serpent, which is what that was called, and we're chasing him into the final zone, being the X Zone. I guess Elon Musk owns this zone. And essentially, this zone has 3 boss fights. The first 2 are pretty simple, since we already fought them before in previous games. Eggman will bring out his ball and chain, known as the Egg Wrecker, which is what it's officially called, now that I know, and we already fought this boss, so it's pretty easy. Then Eggman thinks, you know what will be really good against Sonic? How about I bring out the Egg Drillster? You know how effective that was in Sonic 2? Well, spoiler, it was not effective at all. It's pretty cool to actually have these callbacks here. It's a nice homage to the whole Sonic series. After all, this was the 10th anniversary at the time. But after that, we get to see what Eggman truly had in store for us. The Egg X. Yeah, it doesn't really look like an X to me. This thing is really annoying, so keep in mind that you're probably going to die in this boss fight multiple times. Essentially, he has different parts. You got to wait for him to come out, and he has it's a very limited range to actually hit him. And you got to time your jumps, because he does have attacks that are annoying. He'll move across the screen, he'll use a hand, he'll use a laser, he'll use a little bullet thing, and all the attacks are annoying. It's one of those things you just got to remember the pattern and do it over and over again in order to get it right. It's like one of those Sonic 2 boss fight things, where once you learn the pattern, you can do it, but before that, it's really annoying and tricky. Or as I like to call it, tricky-dicky. Anyway, Sonic will run away as everything starts to explode, or whatever character you're playing as. And depending on what you did in the game, you got the Chaos Emerald to beat the game by every other character, you will get the next zone. The next zone being the Moon Zone. Was this Mario Odyssey? Sonic will become Super Sonic and he'll fly, as Eggman's got a new thing. This boss is known as a Super Egg Robot. Yeah, the Super Egg Robot. It is cool to see Planet Mobius in the background, or Earth, or Sonic's World, or whatever it's called. I'm going to call it Mobius, alright? Here, we got to charge things into the robot that he shoots at us while avoiding his things, because after all, we have a limited amount of rings here. But we can get rings from hitting into them, which is nice. Super Sonic works like he always does. He's based off ring energy. Run out of rings, you lose, but he's invincible. He has knockback, though, so you got to avoid that. But overall, it's not too hard, actually, and it's a pretty fun boss fight to charge at Eggman, and pretty easy, actually. Once that happens, we get a nice little cutscene. All the characters, including a Flicky, are looking up at, did Sonic survive? Who the hell knows? And apparently, a few days later, days later, they didn't know Sonic survived for that long? Jeez fucking Louise. Tails is just flying the tornado around, looking to see if he can find Sonic, and he finds Sonic still in his super state. Apparently, he's collecting enough rings to keep it going for a few days, according to the game. I don't know why it said a few days later. Well, that was not necessary. We then get a grayscale little clip that's similar to Sonic 2, and that's about it. He waves at Super Sonic, and then Super Sonic smiles at the camera. This ending kind of sucks ass, to be honest. It's like, okay, what does this mean? What does it mean? I don't understand it. It wasn't really worth getting all the Chaos Emeralds for this, because It doesn't really seem like a satisfactory ending to me. This was one of those things where the alternate endings are better. The regular ending of Outcast melts after Sonic beats the Egg X. He crashes down and he lands on Sonic's plane head first, but keep in mind Sonic does not take fall damage, like we've seen multiple times over and over again. And Tails saves him and they fly off in the distance. As Sonic Advance doesn't really have much of a story, it's nice to see them hanging out like, yeah, thanks pal. Very nice homage to Sonic 2. Sonic looks in the sky, like, yeah, I did that, yeah. And that's about it. Oh, and he jumps into the camera. Congratulations. Tails' version of the ending is basically a swap of Sonic, where he's falling down and Sonic catches him on the plane. And that's the really big main difference. So, main difference meaning barely any difference at all. And instead of doing a cool pose, Tails decides to get handsy with us. Tails, keep your hands away from me, please. I don't like the way you're positioning them. Knuckles also falls down from the sky, and he is also saved by Sonic in the tornado plane. And he poses, and he has blue eyes. That's kind of cursed looking. What happened to his purple eyes? Amy also falls from the sky, and she does a pose. I don't know how she does that pose in midair. It looks like she needs to stand on something to do that, but she does it anyway. Now, don't go anywhere just yet. Sonic Advance has a couple extra modes, even though we're done with the main game. We've got a versus mode, which you can type a name and connect your GBA to other GBAs. I cannot do this, nor do I think it's probably that interesting anyway. Chao's gonna wait forever, so screw it. There's also a time attack mode, which is in most Sonic games, essentially, where you try to play a level as fast as you can, because it makes the most sense, and try to get a high score, and beat your previous high scores. This works best when you have an online version of it, but since we can't connect the GBA online, it's not as interesting, but hey, you can catalog these better with speedrun.com, basically, if you're really into it. There's also options, which basically is pretty basic. There's actually a level difficulty. There's easy, normal. It only changes the enemies, so not the level design itself. The time up, there's a time up section. We also have a little sound test, which lets us see Amy with maracas. It's pretty adorable, actually. I love it quite a bit. There isn't anything that extreme in the options category, so let's go to the Tiny Chao Garden. The Tiny Chao Garden is, well, tiny. You can connect this to your Sonic Adventure games, DX, and battle with it, and the Chao can do certain things. I'm not exactly sure how it works, because I couldn't really find an option to buy stuff. I have rings, but they don't seem to do much. Also, the Chao has two new things called the Mood and Belly. I'm not too sure how to unlock certain things in this, but yeah, I'm going to change my Chao's name. A Q-Pie? No thank you. That's not the name I want to name my Chao. What I want to name my Chao is Bob. I couldn't really find a way to get to the shop here, honestly enough. I clicked on a bunch of everything here, but I couldn't find it. Maybe I'm just a dunce head. But the Tiny Chao Garden is mostly just used for transporting Chao between different game consoles, but it's kind of the most unintuitive way to do it. You gotta have a copy of one of the adventure games, a link cable from the GBA, a GBA, as well as this copy of Sonic Advance in order to do this. You can buy fruit and stuff, as well as eggs, to buy certain Chao. That's neat and all, but other than that, you can't really do a whole lot with Chao here. It's just a great way to transfer them. Unfortunately, even that's bad, because you only have one Chao at a time in this Tiny Chao Garden. One of the weirdest things, you think these GBAs are options, but no, these are the mini-games. These mini-games help you get rings. You can just play the regular game, or do these. These games are that exciting, like one of them is quite literally just matching. Wow, riveting. The other game is gonna match the hands to them from the fast-moving thing. I just didn't really care about this mini-game, plus I didn't really need rings anyway, so screw it. Maybe Tiny Chao Garden was more interesting back in the day, especially being able to transfer them. It's like similar to the VMU, but even the VMU one sounded more interesting than the Tiny Chao Garden. But yeah, I guess you can transfer stuff. Keep in mind, this is the only, we had to have this in order to get the exclusive Tails Chao that you can only get by having Phantasy Star Online on the GameCube, as well as all this other stuff in order to get that. One of the most expensive ways to get Chao. Let's just say that. And that's all Sonic Advance has to offer. Quite a lot for a little game. Sonic Advance is pretty great, as I mentioned before. It feels like the true Sonic 4. Maybe you want to count Mania. Mania, for me, seems like it has too much repeated levels to be that, but it does have the most in gameplay-wise and visual style. But when it comes to, like, what was Sonic 4, like a 2D game in between the 3D adventure game as well as the classic games, this one works the best. The only problem is that there really isn't much of a story, which would change with the Advance 2 and 3, which will have more of a story mode compared to this game, which has basically nothing. But yeah. It had things that they could fix and add, but for where they started off, DIMS, unless you count Sonic Pocket Adventure, started off really great, and Sonic Advance is definitely worth playing, especially if you're a GBA fan. Unfortunately, as I mentioned before, in order to play this game, you pretty much have to have a GBA or a DS. Miracle!
Superstar Sonic Advance.
Because Sega thought it would be a good idea to have THQ publish all their GBA Sonic games. Like I said, I do not understand why they would do that. They are big enough to do that. I guess they thought about doing it at the time, but why do they have all the games that way? That's why I'm confused. But anyway, nothing matters. Well, virtually Sonic Advance is only on the GBA. Luckily, it sold well enough that it's not too expensive, of being only a $20 game loose. For these games that are coming in boxes, I'm not really counting the complete price unless you really want that box. But yeah, it's not really worth it. Sonic Advance got an Android port in 2011, only in Japan. So if you have a phone that has, I'm not sure how that works actually. Does the phone have to be Japanese or has to be connected to a Japanese server in order to download it? I don't know if it's still up, but you could have downloaded it on your phone in Japan only. Wah wah. Another exclusive version is the Virtual Console on Wii U, which had a GBA section, which allowed you also to play Sonic Advance only in Japan. So far, there haven't been any Switch ports or for their GBA Online subscription. Maybe in the future, it happened on the Wii U, so probably can't happen again. This one's obviously you can't get anymore since they shut that stuff all down because Nintendo doesn't like people playing their old consoles. In 2003, Sega kind of ported Sonic Advance over to the N-Gage, calling it Sonic N. Sonic N is a cropped version because it has a vertical style screen, meaning Sonic Advance doesn't really work that well. So you're playing on a really small screen with a border of Sonic on it. It's kind of lazy and kind of half-assed. N-Gage failed, so no one really talks about Sonic N. It's just Sonic Advance, but worse, with worse music quality as well. So what's the point? However, this game is actually pretty cheap, less than the GBA version, so if you have an N-Gage, which you don't, you can get it. Sonic Advance is going into my A tier. It's up there with the classics, which is not quite. I rank it a little higher than Sonic 1. Sonic 1 has Labyrinth Zone. That's the main reason why. But yeah, Sonic Advance is a good game, with just a little bit of tricky-dicky level design, as I like to call it. One thing I gotta say is that weird Japanese ad. Like, what the? Why was Sonic encouraging the dude to look up a girl's skirt? That's a big problem over there. Don't do that, okay? That's not nice. Sonic Advance is a good game, and it's Advance. Sonic A for Advance. Sonic Advance. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked it, be sure to subscribe, like the video, leave a comment, and you can become a Patreon member. Just have it there just in case anyone wants to do it. I mean, I don't know. You can recommend me to do something down there. I don't really care. That's all I really gotta say. This is the final tier list, and it's gonna stay that way. Maybe I'll change my mind, but I'm not changing my mind on Sonic Pocket Adventure. I don't think it's that great of a game. Sorry.